Welcome to this explainer. Okay, let's dive into this, because today we are going to completely reframe how we look at educational testing. We usually think of assessments as these stressful hurdles, right? Just a way to get a grade on a piece of paper. But for students with additional needs, assessments are so much more than that. They are highly regulated tools for equity. We're talking literal civil rights safeguards here. And understanding the alphabet soup of laws that govern them is absolutely crucial if we want to create truly inclusive environments. So here's our roadmap. We're going to systematically unpack all of this without getting lost. First up, assessment as civil rights. Then we'll hit U.S. frameworks, jump over to Philippine inclusive education laws, break down the core principles, and finally, look at common compliance pitfalls. Section 1, Assessment. Let's start by challenging our basic preconceptions of what an educational assessment is actually doing in the classroom. This matrix right here is our master key. It shows how these different legal frameworks completely transform an assessment from a simple grading mechanism into a strictly regulated process designed to prevent bias. Notice the different primary focuses. You've got IDEA focusing on individualized education, NCLB and SSL looking at systemic accountability, FERPA protecting student data, and the Philippine RA laws ensuring rights and early inclusion. Together, the whole shebang forms this incredible safety net designed to safeguard the civil rights of learners with additional needs. Section 2, U.S. Frameworks, Individualization and Privacy. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the U.S. frameworks act as both a blueprint and a shield for students. Let's look at our blueprint IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So the absolutely crucial point here is that IDEA mandates a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. But how do we actually know what's appropriate for a specific kid? Well, assessment. IDEA requires multi-factored, non-discriminatory assessments. And critically, they've got to be in the student's native language before any special education placement happens. That data directly dictates the measurable goals in a student's individualized education program, or IEP. And it doesn't stop there. It actually mandates triennial reevaluations to make sure the student is, actually progressing. Next up, we have the systemic side of things, NCLB and ESSA. While IDA focuses on the individual student, these acts zoom out to look at district-wide achievement and school accountability. The absolute standout mandate here is 100% participation. Literally, students with disabilities must be included in standardized testing. But, and this is a massive but, it mandates strict requirements for testing accommodations. We're talking extended time, braille, oral presentations, and even alternate assessments for students with significant cognitive disabilities. The goal? To ensure the test is actually measuring their knowledge and not their disability. And here is our shield. FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. This law strictly restricts who can actually see diagnostic evaluations and IEP documents. Access is locked down to authorized personnel and parents. But just as importantly, it grants parents the absolute right to inspect these records, review the assessment protocols, and challenge any inaccurate data. It's an incredibly powerful tool for parental empowerment. Section 3, Philippine Inclusive Education Laws. Now, it's vital to recognize that inclusive education policies aren't just some local U.S. concept, right? They are a necessary global standard for equity. Let's shift our focus and examine two critical pieces of legislation in the Philippines. First, RA 7277, the Magna Carta for Persons with Disability. This law draws a hard line. It explicitly prohibits denying admission or fair evaluation based on a student's disability. It is an absolute anti-discrimination mandate. Building beautifully on that is RA 11650, the Inclusive Education Law. This brilliantly establishes Inclusive Learning Resource Centers, or ILRCs. These centers are mandated to conduct multidisciplinary assessments for early identification and appropriate placement. It basically ensures that specialized evaluation is accessible right at the local level. Section 4, Core Principles of Assessment. Let's take a quick step back from the acronyms for a second and think about the actual human beings, the learners, sitting in these classrooms. How do these legal mandates actually translate into core principles that protect them? And this brilliantly illustrates our first core principle, evaluation versus labeling. Relying on a single test score, like say just an IQ test, to determine a student's educational future, that's not just bad practice. Under IDEA, it's a literal civil rights violation. An evaluation must be multi-factored and multidisciplinary. It can't just look at academic ability. It has to assess practical, functional performance. We are evaluating a whole person, not just assigning a label based on one single metric.
Our next principle is standardization with flexibility, driven by ESSA. High-stakes district testing is required for sure, but it demands valid accommodations. The crucial distinction to understand here is the difference between format and construct. An accommodation, like text-to-speech for a reading comprehension test, levels the playing field by changing the format of the test without compromising the underlying construct. The construct is what the test is actually measuring.
Let's look at a stark scenario to make this really concrete. Imagine giving a standard print test to a student with a visual impairment. Without adapted media, you aren't testing their knowledge of history or science. You are literally only testing their visual impairment. Under laws like RA 7277, failing to accommodate sensory limitations isn't just a minor oversight. It is a direct violation of their civil rights. Then we have data integrity and access. Under FERPA, raw test scores, diagnostic protocols, and IEP notes are highly confidential educational records. This means educators absolutely cannot share or discuss these results in informal staff forums or break room chats. No way. And conversely, schools cannot withhold raw assessment data from parents who are seeking to inspect it. That data belongs to the student and their family. Finally, assessments must be actionable. Under RA 11650 in the Philippines, ILRC assessments aren't meant to just generate a file that sits collecting dust in a cabinet. They must yield dynamic learning support plans, or LSPs. These assessments have to provide real-world actionable recommendations, local curriculum adaptations, and transition services to guarantee the student's ongoing active success. Section 5. Avoiding common compliance pitfalls. Okay, it's time to get a little cautionary here. Often, educators have the best of intentions, but good intentions definitely don't equal legal compliance. Let's look at where things usually go wrong in practice. Pitfall number 1 is a big one: single measure decisions. Placing a learner in a restricted educational setting based on just one classroom exam or relying solely on a teacher's informal observation completely contradicts the multi-factored evaluation mandates of IDEA. It's a massive compliance failure that can severely limit a student's potential, and it violates their right to a comprehensive assessment. Pitfall number 2, unapproved modifications. Let's say a teacher is administering a test and decides on the fly to alter the assessment standards or provide an accommodation that isn't actually documented in the student's official education plan. While they might just be trying to help out, making arbitrary modifications compromises the validity of the assessment. Plus, it violates the strict protocols established by both the IEP and SASA requirements. Everything has to be documented beforehand, no exceptions. And pitfall number 3, consent and communication failures. Administering a formal diagnostic assessment without securing informed parental consent is a huge violation. And informed is the absolute key word here. The consent must be obtained in a language the family fully comprehends. If a school sends a complex legal form in English to a family whose primary language is Spanish or Tagalog, that is not informed consent. Clear, translated communication is an absolute legal necessity. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought. Look at your own district, your own classrooms. Are your school's assessments acting as mere grading tools? Just numbers on a page? Or are they functioning as true, multi-factored safeguards for educational equity? Because as we've seen today, the law demands the latter. Keep asking questions, keep advocating, and keep learning.